And we are live. We're here to chat about all the TV that we watched these last 2 weeks. And this week feels like a treat because I don't just get to talk about TV that I've watched these last 2 weeks. I get to talk about big breath, romantic TV that I've watched these last 2 weeks. And that is just, we're in a little bit of a TV desert right now, and we probably will be off and on. And the whole TV situation had like pandemic disruptions, and then there was the strike disruptions, and et cetera, et cetera. But through it all, sometimes we just kind of had to make do with what we had. Like sometimes it was a good show, but it wasn't a good show in the exact like niche or whatever that I wanted, or it was a good character, but it wasn't my preferred or whatever. But most of the time, it was like it was a good ship, but it wasn't my like preferred ship. Like Kate and I can think of probably multiple cases where we were like, I really wish it had gone differently, but there's literally nothing else to watch. So I guess we're going to be rooting for this, right? Miss Scarlet and the Duke returns soon. So for tonight, we actually get to talk about multiple TV shows with romances. I'm so excited. Most notably the Buccaneers, which if you heard last couple times, Kate talked me into watching it. Boy, did I watch it, marathon the entire thing in less than 1 week. And then Kate has a new show to bring to us to pitch, Artful Dodger, and she's got a good track record. So I am very excited to hear about it. But overall, we're just going to talk about the not just the women that are saving TV this week, but also the romance that is saving TV this week, or is it? Before we get into all of that, let's kick this off with some news. Kate, do you have any news to bring to us?
I do. So PBS announced that there would be a show coming
Great
in
start.
2024 called Miss Austen. So it's gonna be, there's a book, I have it on my shelf over just like 5 feet this way, called Miss Austen by Jill Horton, I think is how you say the author's name, but it is based on some of the letters and things that they still have of Jane Austen's sister Cassandra, and it's going to be a show based on that book, and it's going to be starring Keely Hawes, who is actually married to Matthew McFadden. Ooh. And it's also going to have Rose Leslie, who is another one of my period drama faves. So I'm very excited about that. When I first saw that announced, I made an ungodly sound of just pure delight. I don't know how much. It's been a very long time since I read the book, and I've read plenty of Austen stuff, so it gets a little bit mixed in your head. I don't think there's actually much romance in it, but it's very much just that style and the aesthetic, and period drama is a period drama, and I'm going to watch it no matter what. So I'm very excited.
I am so excited, and I love the fact that it's in the hands of PBS. That somehow I feel pretty good about that. Um, Notwithstanding the Scarlet and the Duke and the trauma that they've put me through. But Miss Scarlet and the Duke actually comes back in January, is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I know it starts like either it's January or February.
So excited. February, Valentine's Day. We better get a good like Valentine's Day episode out of it. We talk a lot about, and by we, I mean I talk a lot about the trauma that Miss Scarlet and the Duke has put me through, but also pour one out for the trauma Miss Scarlet and the Duke has put Carey through. He's really been dragged along on that ride.
We
Um,
talked about compelled to have to watch just to understand the
right.
lunacy that we were spilling. And I don't know if he feels like that's a good decision, but it was a decision.
It was a whole decision.
No, and it's actually a decision that I'm happy with. I think we just have differences of opinion as it relates to what we want to see the outcome of all this. So that's it. That's it. Otherwise, it's been a fun ride. Fun ride.
Amongst the three of us, we have very different opinions on a lot of things, remarkably, despite the fact that we all kind of like know a few foundational shows in our like recent, like past 10 years history. We have very different takes on things, and that's what makes this fun for me, at least. I don't know about anybody else.
Mhm.
That Miss Scarlet and the Duke and a lot of, kind of these Austinian esque shows do allow us is a look into kind of the female psyche. And in that way, even if they're not made for men, they can offer something to men, which I think is very nice. Unless you're like, I've had enough of the female psyche, I would actually like to know nothing more ever again. And that's fair too. Speaking of, uh, the Eras Tour movie was released today. It is available to rent on streaming, etc. I've already seen it in, theaters. It's, great, a masterpiece, whatever. But with that, we also got the news within the last week that Taylor Swift is Times Person of the Year. And I'll just give a little plug that if you have not read the Times article about that, it is a really, really just like excellent piece of journalism. Not meaning to praise a man, it was really excellent. The way her entire career is kind of like summarized and certain like lessons you can learn at the end, and you see the writer of it actually learning certain things about what she says and what she really means by what she says. And it's a really good, even if you don't care about Taylor Swift and you don't care about whatever, if you care about good writing, that's a very well written article. Okay.
I haven't read it, but I will probably go read it now.
Hashtag agree. And funny thing is, I remember posting, because I don't know how it happened that she was Times Person of the Year, and I did not know it immediately, right? So I posted it in all the places that I post things that are important to me, right? And so someone made the comment of like, the general comment you would expect, time of the year, Taylor Swift, how did that happen, right? And I'm like, where have you been in 2023? And it's like, so I personally, and so my next comment was like, so why do you think she was not Person of the Year? And that's when people's true colors show. So my response was to just basically, because social media arguments with people that I know and respect, even if they have differences of opinion, don't always and they're not always going to go the way you want them to go. So my response was to, hey, here's this story, and here's this story, here's the plethora of information. If you still feel the same way that you do after, it doesn't matter who they were going to name Time Person of the Year, you would not have agreed. So
yeah. There are just certain people you can to your point, that you can just ask people about, and based on their reaction, you immediately know a lot about their value system. I think Meghan Markle is a really good example of that. That's a really good way of what kind of intersection of racism and anti-feminism do they have going on? She's a good one you can ask about. I saw somebody mention on TikTok. Another good one is just ask about literally any Black quarterback and see what their opinion on that, and that will also be very telling.
And unless it's Patrick Mahomes,
on a lighter, on a bit of a lighter note, kind of interpreting that, I do a similar thing where if you, as somebody who I'll occasionally listen to Taylor Swift, I do like to participate in the conversation. Would I say I'm a Swiftie? Probably not, but casual listener, and I am interested in it because it's a fascinating thing to talk about. But if you put on your dating profile that stop talking about Taylor Swift, or if you can hold a conversation and not bring up Taylor Swift, I'm like, cool. I don't really love her so much. I wouldn't go to the grave for her, but it is a red flag because you don't like talking to women. You don't understand why we communicate the way we do, and you have no interest in learning such. And to me, that's a massive red flag.
They don't like when women are passionate about things. They don't like when women talk about their feelings. Yes. They don't like when women care a lot about something that's not super inconsequential. So even though Taylor Swift is not the thing that you care a lot about, there are a lot of things that you care a lot about. So if they don't like somebody who's passionate about X, they're not going to like somebody who's passionate about Y. And then they'll also probably be miserable for the rest of their life. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, because how I see it is if you can't even put up with me talking about the most basic, easy conversation about pop culture, about Taylor Swift, how are you ever going to be able to hold a conversation with me when I talk about in great detail about an Australian doctor that's also a spin-off from a classic novel and why I think it's great? We're not going to gel well, and you're a red flag.
Right. mentally you're up here and they're like they've not crossed the threshold. They haven't entered into the life is hard. I am so sorry that you are in the trenches. We're sending you love and light. So, uh, that's the news for this week, but we have a lot that we get to talk about this week, not necessarily in terms of the number of shows, but in terms of the volume of episodes watched, I would say. Both Kate and I have been on a marathon journey this last week. And Carrie, I believe you're
Mhm.
on a rewatch journey, and you are here to ask us questions and figure out if you would ever subject yourself to either of these two shows. The answer might be no.
Yes, my purpose on this pod is to basically be the conduit. So that will be my duty and responsibility for today.
Fantastic. Let's kick things off with a bang, all puns intended, and talk about the Buccaneers. And I think that Kate and I have a difference of opinion. So let's just start right off the bat. Correct my memory if my memory's wrong. You are pro Nan and Guy and anti Nan and Theo. Is that correct? Or you're like neither or
That
whatever?
is not so. I am in this. I am in the I regret reading the book before watching the show sphere. And if I had only watched the show, I would have been a full Theo, could do no wrong. I was just sitting on the edge of my seat going, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And then they never did anything bad with him. And I
Right?
lost years on my life because they never did the bad things with him. They instead gave it to a different character.
Wait,
And
what did they
so
take
that's
from him and give to a different character?
so really more just like the oh my gosh, you're such an awful human being and you hate women so much. And they gave it all to James.
Oh,
Um James was kind of like a he could be bad, he could be fine character in the book. You don't really know much about James.
hmm.
In the book, they actually like do kind of this time jump thing where he proposes and then you time jump to when they're already married and Theo's kind of a terrible husband. And so
Okay.
those were the aspects that I was worried about, where he was going to be very emotionally manipulative and blaming her for being an American, basically, and not
Hmm.
understanding the role that she accepted and signed up for. Very much like how Richard was in the first half and how James was in the second half.
Yeah.
And so they gave all of those toxic traits to those two guys and just left him to be like the uh, awkward, I don't want to do this job, but I have responsibility, so I have to. I love you and I want to marry you. Just like, little golden retriever boy that he actually was in the show. I don't like Guy. I don't like Guy in either interpretation, but
Okay.
I
Okay,
don't
never
hate him
mind.
either. He's just kind of a,
We don't have a difference of opinion then.
yes. Yeah.
We have a question, Carrie.
Carrie.
So Theo, right?
Yeah.
In terms of not bringing his toxic from the novel to this medium, do you think that that was more of a narrative choice and they just didn't want to go in that direction, or was it perhaps a practical choice in that they did not feel like the actor could pull that off? Because I know in some stories they have an idea of what they want a character to do, and then they are presented with the material and they're not able to necessarily pull it off in a convincing way. And so I'm just wondering if that was the case, or if they just sort of wanted to go against type because the expectation was that those terrible traits were going to come about, and this is an opportunity to flip it on its head, or if they just narratively decided we're not going to just do that with this character.
Mm. Do you have any opinion on this, Cammie? Because I have kind of like a handful of things to say about it.
I think that the uncomfortable answer is they needed to create a love triangle. Now, the whole premise of this show is sort of like there is a love story, and the love story is the four girls loving each other. Not like there's any like ships between the four girls per se, but there's the there's the group of these four girls, and they all love each other, root for each other, and sacrifice for each other. And that culminates in, in the final episode, the main character girl, not because she is the best. In fact, she might be, the air quotes worst. She's kind of like a makes all situations about herself type of person. She's supposed to be marrying a duke that day, which is Theo, is the guy we're talking about. Up until this point in the show, he has truly done nothing wrong, like truly nothing. In fact, even like instances where he might have said something like slightly offensive, it was because he was trying to make her realize that somebody might be trying to use her for her money, like things like that, where he's, he might be pointing at a flaw in somebody, and it might seem like unbecoming of a duke, but he's actually trying to protect her. But overall, for the most part, he's done nothing wrong. But she is in love with somebody else, a guy who potentially was trying to use her for her money at first, but did fall madly in love with her, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like he's not trying to get married. He wants to travel the world with her. There's just like a lot of things that feel very red flaggy about him. That's Guy, right? And because there are some red flaggy aspects to Guy, but not really bad, like we as the viewer are supposed to be rooting for Nan and Guy the entire time. They've got good chemistry. They are the story. They're endgame. It is very clear. She's not going to be with the Duke. She's going to be with this like adventurous guy because like he's, I don't know, taller and more handsome, whatever. They needed to make sure that the Duke was still a like viable point in that triangle. And I think that is what we're seeing here. Because in a TV show, we're watching it episode to episode. Not me, I marathon the whole thing in a week again. But most people are watching this episode to episode, and you need to have that time to like theorize. Could like Kate was theorizing last week, like could they be doing something different from the book? I don't think they're doing something different from the book, but like, are they actually creating a viable option here? Are we question whether she ends up with Guy at the end? And to be clear, the end of this season, as far as I can tell, is not actually the end of the story. So at the end of the season, it's sort of like, where do they go? She's clarified that like Guy is the one who has her feelings, but she's not in a position to be with him. But there is still a triangle to supplement the fact that the entire love story is between the girls, which is lovely as well. And some of the other girls have viable love interests. Some of the girls have semi-viable love interests where like they can be together, but like in society because it's like a lesbian love interest. Some have a truly like terrible abusive love interest, and everything in between. So there's a lot of romance. Thus my excitement at the top of this, because I'm like, some of it's good and some of it's bad. But quantity over quality, I guess, question mark. That's kind of what the show is giving specifically. They're giving you quantity over quality. You get two and neither of them is perfect. Would you say that's fair, Kate?
I would say that to an extent. I agree. Part of what it also feels like is, again, the original novel itself is actually just a first draft manuscript that didn't get fully finished. So it covers like a little bit before the first episode where you're getting introduced to who, what's her name? Oh,
Conchita.
There's Conchita. Yes. You're meeting Conchita. She's being adopted into the society that the four other girls live in. And you're getting a lot of the perspective about like the mothers and that kind of stuff, which is why I was wary about Mrs. St. George. Mrs. St. George in the novel is very racist. Just really? That's most of what her character is just racism.
Oh, that's awful.
Yes.
Okay, they took that out entirely. Right?
It's a massive rewrite on her character. Now, the first episode, yeah. What was that?
Sorry, there's a delay. I just wanted, as far as I saw in the show, they took that out entirely. We're talking about Christina Hendricks' character. Redhead mom.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
These were the rewrite.
They took it out completely in the book, in the show. And they leaned more into the side of her character that's far more concerned with making sure that their family obtains and maintains social hierarchy, social relevance in the New York society and then eventually in London society. In the show, she's far more likable. She's far more sympathetic. You do understand where she's coming from. You understand her struggle. Massive improvement. And I could immediately see what they were doing with her. Then you get a lot of what happens where Conchita marries Richard and they all go to London to court these suitors. The storyline about the governess is not completely different, but it's not the same.
Okay.
There is hints that her and Richard have some like secret past, but first of all, the ages seem closer together in the book past for what the problem that she is
Hmm.
in the show, but that's not even like it's not clear what they were hinting at in the book. You just knew that they had a past and it had some undertones if they had a romantic history, but that wasn't certain and it was hard to tell. And they
Okay.
really leaned into she was his governess and they had a creepy romantic history. So that was changed. And all of that leads into really, they spend a whole lot more time in the courtship phase in the show than they do in the book.
Right.
Um, they get, she gets married, and you spend a lot of time exploring how all of them hate being married in the book. There are actually other books that have been published with other authors finishing the story based on her notes. And I haven't read any of those, but I almost am curious if some of those aspects were then used in the show, because I would say the first 2 or 3 episodes are pretty accurate in a lot of ways to the book, that
Hmm.
in ways that they had time to cover. They cut the Mrs. St. George problems, made her a more likable character, but everybody else had very similar beginnings. I would say starting in like episode 4, where she agrees to marry the Duke, is where we really get this big change of what's actually happening on the screen. It's new stuff, new development, and where I was starting to become concerned, because you get the real first episode where they're really courting, and he seems great, and I was nervous because I was worried they were going to make us really love him, and then do a switch at the end. Because it's
Mm.
kind of how the book feels, where you're like, he's fine, or he's even a good guy, and then it's the final switch up, which is how I felt about it. But then this final episode made me go, oh, I was completely misunderstanding the entire goal of this show anyway. I assumed that the goal of this show was to be a mini series, like a one and done, flash in the pan. We're gonna go all out and do the whole story in one season. And then they started like 5 different other plot lines in one episode, leading to the hope of, hey, we'll have a second season, right?
Right.
And that made me
Ginny
go,
escaping
okay,
abuse,
that's why I
Nan finding her
misunderstood.
mom, Conchita, potentially rekindling her marriage, but, you know, distancing from their royal
Yes,
fund source,
friend.
Harry and Meghaning it out of the royal family, etc. Who am I forgetting? Oh, what's her
Yes,
name?
Mabel.
Yeah, Mabel and her girlfriend. They're super
And
cute.
then like Lizzie has a whole, like, Lizzie didn't really get it more set up, but they're supposed to be more with Lizzie. And so basically halfway through the season they completely pivoted from the source material, which is fine,
Mhm.
and I really did enjoy it. It just, I was bracing for impact the entire way through, worried they were going to change Theo, and in fact they changed everybody else.
Mhm.
Well, they changed Theo, um, and everybody else into this, like, he's actually a great guy. He doesn't want to be like used in this situation, but he does love her and he does want to marry her, and that's going to be a real sticking point if they do get renewed for a second season.
Just
But
really bought into the fact that she liked him too. Like I bought into he really liked her. They've got great
mhm,
chemistry. The moment they meet, they don't know who each other, you know, who they are, whatever, which is exactly what he wanted. He didn't want somebody liking him for his title. They continue to have great chemistry, both in terms of like romantic, physical, whatever. Like she seems into him. It's just she apparently is into him, but is more into Guy. And that's one of the things I struggle with, aside from the fact that like Guy is a terrible best friend. Like you're going for your best friend's girl. That's
yes,
crazy, a wild move. But I wasn't necessarily like to have great chemistry, but I wasn't necessarily sold on like, oh, she loves him so much more that marrying the Duke is such a, imposition. It just, I don't know. It felt
yeah.
there was
Well,
something
So
missing there.
this, I'm
yeah,
assuming
and
you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just add like the point of also the actress that the actress for Nan and the actress or the actor for Theo are actually together in real life. So
Oh,
they
that
really can't
explains
help
it.
having pretty good chemistry.
Never mind. That tracks.
Yeah. Um, yeah. They had really great chemistry. And if there is anything that I think they might have pivoted, really capitalized on that chemistry and why I thought that they were doing a really good job of hyping him up.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not that her and Guy had bad chemistry. It's more of, honestly, weirdly enough, for as much as they really had to pivot and like sell on this being a love triangle story, they didn't have a ton of time for her to really show that she was in love with either one of them. Uh,
That
if there was any, it was like the third episode where she confesses to Guy like that she was illegitimate, and then in like the fourth episode where you're following their courtship right after they engaged. Those are the
mhm.
two respective episodes where you get, okay, I could see where she's like having feelings for each guy. But then after that, it's a lot of
It
her
was very
continuing
much
to
like
go,
her backing up, and like you kind of expect this ending of like I'm choosing myself, which would have been insufferable
mm,
because she clearly chooses herself every day. I say this with love and light, but she does. But at the end,
mhm,
she's sort of like choosing to help her sister get out of this situation by sacrificially marrying the guy that she seems to really like. And he's really great. And he's done nothing but
yes.
stand by her side, and he stood up to his family, and et cetera, et cetera. Carrie, please ask your question. I'm so sorry.
No worries. I was just gonna say, like superficially, it all when you talk about a love triangle, particularly when it's like one woman and two guys, you
Mhm,
always sort of forget like the good guy and the bad boy, right?
mhm.
So it feels like maybe there are elements of that. And to your point, it's like if you're gonna have this good guy sort of bad boy sort of situation, one of them has to be the good guy, and it's probably the one that we were not expecting, right? At least based on what the expectation was. Um, so I don't know if I'm posing that as a question, but I'm just wondering, is there any truth to that, or am I way off base?
I think there is truth to that. Kate, what do you think?
I would say there's truth to that, but it's almost like yes, but they didn't want to commit to that.
Hmm.
I mean, Guy stands in as the bad boy aspect of like, he's not as clean cut. He is the best, like the guy's best friend. He's
They
not
try to make
the
him seem not
typical
as clean cut. He's
choice.
obviously like a very extremely
Yes,
handsome, looks like he should be a model for blah blah blah,
yes.
etc. He's the more classically attractive one of the two
Honestly, I
guys.
was talking more about the facial hair than anything else.
Yes, yes.
But but even by then, you can see like, yeah, that's your best friend's girlfriend, but other than that, he's not a bad guy, and it's just that he's poor and that he needs money. And
Hmm.
then they kind of end it with him doing something for as frustrating as a kind of really the entire arc of the triangle. You have to go, okay, but like he is a decent guy because he
Hmm.
did help this woman who he doesn't really have any prior relationship towards. In fact, I would say that he probably dislikes her because of the pain she's caused Nan,
Hmm.
but recognized, oh, she did all of this because she was trying to protect herself from her abusive husband, and steps in and does help Nan when Nan asks for help. And you're left going, oh, he is a great guy. But then you could just as easily say that if she was able to be as honest to Theo about the entire situation, that he wouldn't have done everything in his power. And instead of having for her to go like run off into the, unknown, Theo is a duke. Theo could have done a ton of different things to help protect her if she had
Hmm.
just asked. Um, it's not that like he wouldn't have been able to do anything, or even necessarily he would have been able to protect her in the end all be all fully because of laws and X, Y, and Z. But it's framed as if Guy is this great savior, helped in the end, when really it's just circumstance. He was
Hmm.
there, he was available, he was there because they were doing something naughty. behind Theo's back, and he was
Right.
just available at the time to be a person to help. He was
That's like
not
something we
like
should not
the
skim over. The
selfless
fact that like
creature.
Nan is a cheater while engaged.
Oh yeah,
She's a cheater, like
yes, the night
emotional,
before her
borderline
wedding.
physical. Yeah, and literally the night before her wedding. That's why I'm like, Nan is the worst of them, but like I get it. It's supposed to
Yes,
be like we're all like messy Americans, and I'm like, being messy American probably means like you maybe don't use the right fork. It doesn't necessarily mean like sleeping with your fiance's best friend the night before your wedding. I just feel like that's maybe like not messy American. Or maybe that's just me that I didn't
I
do that. Am I not participating in American culture? Let me know in the comments down below.
Well, you obviously did not
I
grow up watching
it's
80s
interesting because
soap operas.
No, I did not. No, I did not.
well, and I will say that's kind of like a side note of just the weird choices they made to depict the American girls. That
Yes.
you had the backstabbing Jenny, and you had the like chaotic, I want to be the center of attention all the time Conchita, and you had the self-centered, self-grandizing Nan, and then you had Lizzie, who just like wanted a guy, didn't get the guy, and then had like really like detrimental experiences with the same man, and then had to deal with his shame, which was dark. And then you had Mabel, who was dealing with her own sexuality. And honestly, I wish that
Mabel's
Lizzie and Mabel
representation
were the
of
stars of the
American culture
show.
is just like gay, which fair.
Yeah, gay. Yeah. I honestly, if we had to deal with these characterizations, I would have rather watched a show mainly about Lizzie and Mabel.
100%.
Because Lizzie didn't get a ton of star time, but when she did, she like held your attention. She was a fantastic actress that had a lot of dimension for not having a lot of lines, and I was intrigued with how she was dealing with that dark edge of her story. And then Mabel was again able to tell a really complicated story without getting a ton of screen time, and you know, able to do like they hurt each other. Her and her girlfriend Honoria were able to hurt each other's feelings, but it's not like either of them were a bad guy. They just, awful situation, and were able to really explore that in a really interesting way. And I think
And come
both of them
back
had
together.
more, yes, come back together. And I think honestly those sisters had a more interesting story to tell, and they had a
Yes.
better sisterhood. Because
I would really
Ginny
like to
and
see
Nan were
them
terrible sisters.
rotate who is the
Yeah.
lead from season to season. Because this season, it really felt like Nan was the lead. Fine,
Mhm.
whatever. But like, even from the beginning, from the dropping the shoe on the cake and the, whatever. And to their credit, they do point out to her throughout the season of like, you make everything about you, blah, blah, blah. But I think that would almost make more sense as a side character, like a sideshow annoyance rather than the lead. Because if it was like a side annoyance and she was like this chaotic, somewhat self serving side character, I think I would actually like her better because I'd be like, okay, you got to have this person who's like maybe not
Mhm.
reading the room and is doing these like anti-hero slash bad things from time to time, but like when it comes to her sisters she still pulls through and like helps them escape from abusive situations. Like that just gives me it reads better as side character. I would like to see them rotate and have a season where they're focusing on Mabel or Izzy's recovery or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also say, just from a writing perspective, to make you still root for Nan and like say, oh, Nan's a great character. This is going to sound like really callous, and I don't mean it in this way, but they used Ginny's story to make Nan look better.
Yeah,
They,
they did.
Ginny was, Ginny is a, Ginny is not a nice person. She was never nice to Nan, even before she found herself in a terrible situation. But that doesn't mean that she deserved the situation she ended up in.
Right.
And any, decent person should have been attempting to help her get out of that situation. So they end the season going, isn't Nan this great sister who just forgives her sister for doing something awful to her and, sacrifices the rest of her life to marry this this man she doesn't love, even though it's Theo, who is an attractive, wealthy man who is in love with her. Oh
Right.
my goodness, I so sorry
What
for her.
what a
That big old
sacrifice.
sacrifice.
Play the
When
world's
in
tiniest
actuality,
violin.
what a sacrifice. Yes. And it's an interesting way to play this like emotional manipulation onto the audience of you really should be rooting for Nan, even though we've kind of made her not a great person and emotionally non-committing and kind of selfish and self-serving and self-centered. But you're gonna have
And
to love
she
her because you're
also
gonna have to
like
root for her next season
here's
if we
the
get
other thing, and
renewed.
I'm not trying to like dog on her exclusively because like it's fine. She did some things that were somewhat
Mhm,
interesting. Her whole thing where like, there's these two guys that
mhm,
are like, you're the most like interesting, coolest person I've ever met, whatever, is mostly because she does not go along with some, not all, but some of the culturally prescribed performance of femininity. So when they're at the ball and they're supposed to be debuting to the queen or whatever, she's like, they're lined up like cattle. This is awful. Like, but she quite literally places herself above it by going in the balcony. She sees herself as above performative femininity. And that from the beginning makes
mhm.
me think yes, she's like on the right track. Like she has some points to make, but it's not because she is, rooting for her sisters necessarily or rooting for women as a whole. Like she's not above looking down on women as a whole. Or if she has a sister who really needs this ball to succeed, she's not above still ruining it
Mhm.
for her because she doesn't take it seriously. And if she doesn't take it seriously, then nobody should take it seriously. And I see them trying to contrast that at the end of like, you thought you were above this performance of culturally prescribed femininity and romance and whatever, but by the end you have to go along with this
Mhm.
marriage because you need to do that to save your situation and your mom's situation and your sister's situation. She's saving multiple people by doing it, but by the end you're left thinking, or I'm left thinking, like, this isn't that much of a sacrifice. You're kind of just being dramatic, like he's not a bad guy. Like you love him and he
Mhm.
loves you, and he's a duke and he's using you to further his lineage or using you for your money or literally anything. Like what is the holdup here?
Yeah,
You're
it
literally just you like this broke guy because he's hot.
yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, because if they had built the Duke up more into like really solidly hinting at he was going to take that turn where he was going to be the really emotionally controlling husband, then it would have been more of a sacrifice, and you would have been able to go, she's had her issues, but that is a good sister choice. Them playing it as her sacrificing something, it's kind of hysterical. In all honesty, I
Oh,
didn't hate it.
literally.
I didn't love it. It was a choice. Choices were made. I I didn't go into this realizing that they were going to try to push for a second season, but this is a show that much more than I've seen in recent history was really pushing for a second season in their finale, and I just wasn't expecting that, but I guess we'll see if it worked.
They literally started and ended with a Taylor Swift song. So whatever they're doing, they've got their connections and
And
marketing up. Well,
yeah, whatever bad thing I could say about this show, the soundtrack is quality.
oh, banger after banger the entire way through. I
So
hope you saved some of your
Mhm.
voice because you are still going to need to pitch to us the
before you,
second show of the night, The Artful Dodger. I will give a quick shout out to Stormy in the chat. She says, hi, everyone. How's everyone doing on the evening of Taylor Swift's birthday? Happy birthday, Taylor. So glad that all of the holidays that we celebrate this month are all revolving around. I said that. She said, I finally watched a new show. And then she gives a shout out to the article that we mentioned, the Times article, where she liked the quote where Taylor said, the trash eventually takes itself out. She mentioned that the character Nan that we're discussing sounds a bit like Eloise from Bridgerton. which reminds me, we didn't mention, we got some Bridgerton news this week that it's coming in 2 parts, that it's coming May of next year. And also, Stormy, that is a very astute observation. I also, Stormy, want to know what new show you watched this week. Well, how about, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, before I get into Artful Dodger, it sounded like Carey had a question.
Just to inject a little bit of testosterone in here, going back to something you guys mentioned. So apparently, like, Theo and Guy are friends to some degree, right?
Besties.
So yeah, one of them's a duke and one of them's poor. Why don't he just say, hey man, come work for me, here's a freaking money? How you
No,
let your boy
literally.
ride out like that? How do you let your boy ride out poor like that?
Well, and like, you know, poor is a relative term. He was a gentleman who lost his fortune. And there is a point where Theo offers to help, like offers, do you need help? You can come live with me? Like, do you need money? Theo does make the attempt, and it's a thing of, like, you know, generational pride and X, Y, and Z. Why Guy does not take him up on that offer.
So you're
probably
too
also
proud
a bit of, like,
to
internal
accept your best
guilt
friend's
from
help, but you're not too proud to steal your best friend's fiance.
Well,
Crazy.
And that's sort of what makes me think that they're not real tight. Because if one of my friends was in a way, you offer them assistance in a way that you know that they can take it without them feeling like they're, like, sort of taking the hand out or something, right? It's like, hey, I really need you to do this, or, you know what I mean? So it sort of, to your point, it sort of feels like, obviously, Guy going after his girl is just a way of him saying, you're not better than me.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not really
I think it is kind of like him trying to take some sort of status. I think there is, like, a true jealousy there. But in terms of the plot as well,
yes,
the Duke, Theo, finds out about the fact that Guy has, you know, like, his family estate is falling apart. He finds out about that at the exact same time that he finds out that Guy and Nan are potentially closer than he previously realized. And he starts to get wind of what's going on. Now he, the Duke, had realized that Guy and his family's intention for him, whatever, was for him to potentially marry Rich, and that might solve his problem and restore his family's estate. So the Duke, Theo, is thinking, oh, is he actually after Nan because he likes her, or is he potentially after Nan because he wants her money because she's a rich American? And he does a couple things. He tries to offer him financial assistance in some way, and he also tries to set him up with, you know, a lovely, eligible young woman who is from a rich family as well. So he's kind of trying all angles, but he finds out about the poor thing right around the same time that he finds out this guy might be after his girl. So, like, there's already a rift from jump.
That tracks. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and the book makes it even worse. Yeah, the book makes it even worse because when he loses his fortune, he flirts with Nan, then he leaves the country for many years, goes to South America, and you know what happens in South America during this time period, and gets a wife. His wife dies. He comes back, decides, I still want Nan, and Nan's already married to Theo. That's how it happens in the book.
We're supposed to be rooting for Guy?
Which is...
On what grounds?
Exactly. I don't know. That's why I mean, it's a cluster. I don't understand what
You know how bad he has to be for me to be rooting for a guy who paints? I'm fundamentally opposed to male artists. Yeah. And I'm having to root for a male artist. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, with what limited time that we have left, I want us to briefly walk through our Women of the Week, and then Kate will take us out with her pitch of The Artful Dodger. Carey, you haven't got to speak too terribly much tonight. Would you be a starting point on Woman of the Week?
I'll go ahead and do, like, a really quick one. My Woman of the Week is Hannah John Kamen. I've been rewatching Killjoys, which aired on Sci-Fi back in the day. And the reason she's the lead of the show is basically a sort of a futuristic sci-fi show about a group of bounty hunters. And then, of course, after about year two or year three, it gets sort of deep into this sort of mythology of the show, which is fine and fantastic. Um, but it's sort of a little bit of a different show at that point than what we started out with. Long story short, I think I just finished season 3, and the reason why I'm giving her like Woman of the Week is because not only is she the lead of the show, she also in this past season has played like 2 different characters. So she's not only been carrying the show from jump, but now she's playing 2 different people at the same freaking time. And I'm probably going to assume and imagine she did get like double pay for it. But it's just a fun show. If you don't remember her or don't know the name, if you what was it? The second Ant-Man movie, I believe she was the antagonist in that. She played Ghost, and I call her antagonist. She was not a villain. She was just misunderstood and had reasons for her actions, which is why she was an antagonist. Long story short, that is my Woman of the Week. She is an official certified badass. Hannah John King.
I love that. Kate, you're up.
Okay, so I had a bit of a hard time deciding between Sidra and Lady Belle, but because I'm about to talk about Lady Belle for Artful Dodger, I'm going to go Sidra. So Sidra is a woman in the A River Enchanted series. I think it's actually a different name for the series, but that's the first book. The second book is called A Fire Endless. Very good duology that I read this past week. It has 2 romances in it that I would say are very good. I did prefer one, which is the one that between Torin and Sidra. Sidra is this healer, and she has married Torin because Torin's first wife died in childbirth, and Torin is a guard man, and he needed extra help taking care of his daughter, so she stepped up and said, I will marry you, and I will help you take care of your daughter. And then she became a healer, or she was already a healer, and is kind of develops into being the healer of the clan. And eventually throughout the story, he becomes the lord of the clan, and when he's gone for a period of time, she has to lead the clan. And she has this very kind-hearted but kind but soft as nails type situation where she won't let people walk all over her. She does what she thinks is best for the group, and she does it with a kind heart, and eventually saves herself. It's one of my favorite tropes where, you're falling down the pit, or you're have the mortal illness. Very like Gemma in the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where she has to save herself from the illness that's creeping in. And throughout all of this, she is able to actually establish a relationship and a romance and a deep love with her husband that kind of shapes the direction of how they go and they lead their village, as well as a really beautiful relationship with her stepdaughter, who becomes a and spirit of his wife, or her husband's dead wife. So that's fun. Very interesting character. Was kind of more of a supporting character throughout most of the books, but it was a very interesting player in that story, and I loved her a lot. And then I'll talk about Lady Belle when I talk about Artful Dodger.
I'm excited about that, and shout out Sidra. I have picked as my Woman of the Week for this week Elizabeth from Lessons in Chemistry. Have either of you watched Lessons in Chemistry?
I have not. I've seen a lot of like little clips for it, and I've thought about watching it. I just haven't watched it yet.
Kate, you would love it so much. So Elizabeth's played by Brie Larson in Lessons in Chemistry, and she plays a chemist, a biochemical researcher in I don't know exactly what time period it is. I think like the early 60s, late 50s, something to that effect. And she kind of hits a certain wall, whereas a woman, she can't necessarily get much further in the field, but then she events gets to use her chemistry skills in order to host. It is fabulous. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me do all the things. Just a really like big feelings kind of show, but also very just if you want to root for a quirky woman and not have her change or become unquirky or go through some sort of become perfect makeover at the end, this is the show for you. It's just lovely, and she does such a wonderful job with a very difficult task. Well, with the time that we have remaining, which I realize we're already right at 9, but let's just go over time, 5, 10 minutes. Follow your heart, Kate. I would love to hear why we should watch The
Okay.
Artful Dodger because it is all over my social feeds.
Okay, I have barely seen it on any social media. Same with Dodger or the Buccaneers, but that's a whole other
Really?
thing. So in the same vein of, yeah, I've barely seen either one. In the same vein of like, lovably unlikable female characters, I bring you Lady Belle. So Artful Dodger mainly follows this guy named Jack Dawkins. If you've read Oliver Twist, you've met this character before. He, in Oliver Twist, it ends up in jail, and through a series of events kind of recounted through flashbacks in the show, find out that he escaped, was brought onto like a naval ship to be an apprentice to the surgeon on the Navy, and then became like a lieutenant surgeon through the Navy. Once he got out of the Navy, he became a surgeon in Australia, and is kind of like the underdog surgeon within this practice in Australia. And he forms kind of like a mentorship frustrating bond with Lady Belle, who is the daughter of the governor of this town in Australia. And she is very like bookwormy, but very like ENTP to the extreme.
Hmm.
She is bossy. She is I want it this way or the highway, and in the best way possible. She is very, very well read, especially about biology and chemistry. And she has all these medical tools that she just kind of learns and talks about. And you come to find out that a lot of it is due to her own medical advocacy. She has a medical condition that's not really diagnosed until the very last episode about what exactly she has, but you do have very much get hints and clues as to what she's going through. And her wanting to be a surgeon is both selfless and selfish. She wants him to train her to be a surgeon. She wants to learn how to do it, and she wants to become the first female surgeon. And so their relationship is kind of held over open bodies, and it follows a lot about his life as a thief, his gambling issues, his story dealing with his past, as well as his relationship with her. And it's muddled with, he was a poor common thief in his past life and now is a doctor. But even then, like, doctors were penniless back then. They were kind of paid by the goodwill of others.
Hmm.
She is, probably the richest woman in the area. And they come from very different lives, and she's trying to promote him through the ranks, and their relationship is not clear cut. It is not perfect. It is not without its flaws and its toxic traits every once in a while, but it has very similar things from like Miss Scarlet and the Duke. And it's very heartwarming. It's very lovely, and it's well earned, I think. This show also ends in a season finale that sets up for a possible second season, and that one I could actually see far more likely getting a second season. I felt a little gypped by how it ended, but in more of like I want, like, what happens next kind of way, rather than are you serious type of way. I wanted them to be able to kind of hug and embrace and be happily ever after. But if we're getting a second season, that's also great too. It definitely does end with the second season setup where you feel like maybe this could have been done a little better if we knew this was the only season we would get. But if it's setting up for something else, that's great too. But I think both characters are really well done, have their own character story. The setting is beautiful. It has very period drama feel, but it's in Australia, so it's brightly lit, and there's a lot of different fabrics that are not used in a lot of like English stories. It's a different vibe. You still have area antagonists. It also feels momentarily, like not momentarily, but often it feels a little procedural. So every single episode they have a different like case of the week, but it's far more with the same through line. They still have the main story is very much the most prominent thing, but each episode does follow like this is the case that they're attacking. This is the issue. Yes.
I have a question. You mentioned that there's like
Yes.
light little elements, a little sprinkle of toxicity in the relationship. Can you compare and contrast this to
Yes.
other toxic relationships, Eliza and the Duke, for example, or fish one out of the memory bank?
I did kind of already compare it to Eliza and the Duke. It actually also has very similar feels of like Mr. Knightley and Emma, which
Okay.
in
Yeah.
retrospect does feel a little bit like Miss Scarlet and the Duke.
Yeah.
In the sense of like it can feel a bit like she's really knowledgeable and he is also very knowledgeable because just existence, and it can come off almost as like mansplaining, but not in a sense of like he wants to, but more of like in society he's been the professional and she's just self-educated, and that causes conflict. Also, like their different worldviews cause conflict. There's a bit of lying that happens, but neither one are choosing to lie because of a relationship issue. It's more of, I don't know you well enough to trust you with my deepest, darkest secret yet, and therefore things are withheld. There is the conflict of the family's not approving. I mean, the governor's daughter doesn't marry the doctor, and that's a conflict. It's not fully toxic like Nan and Guy, or Nan and Theo even.
Right.
It's more of just there is a bit of a, once they realize they're in love with each other, there's a headlong run into the finish line, and then a straight face plant into reality is kind of the best way I can explain the arc of it. It's slow burn. It's they're flirting over bodies and then they kiss, and there's an episode of romance, and then there's an episode of you cannot look at my daughter ever again, and then oh no, she's
That
dying.
historically works so well.
So well.
Yes.
So there is a lot of it that is very, these are all the tropes that would happen in a period drama, and that's fine. It's great. I heartily recommend it. Is it perfect? No. Is it the best thing I've ever seen? No. But is it better than a lot of things I've been watching recently? Yes. I watched it in a sitting. We don't have to talk about that one though.
So did you say that like they determine what her illness is, or they just sort of hinted at it? Because the question I'm going to have is obviously is he going to wind up having
officially
to try to
give
save her?
it a they give official diagnosis. Like she throughout most of it, she has chest cramps, like chest pain. She grabs at her chest. She has a time breathing. She just needs a minute, and then she's fine. And then like her sister kind of says, you get these spells, and you've had like 8 spells this month, and I count. That kind of verbiage around it. You very much get a lot of that's a lot more like physical storytelling where you just see it, and they make a very concerted effort for you to see this, but nobody really talks about it. It's kind of like what are you talking about? She's fine. In fact, like that's how her family treats it for the most part. It's girl problems. Ugh. But when she finally tells Jack, the doctor, I have this issue, it is taken very seriously by him, and they both immediately understand that nobody who has ever had this condition survives until Yeah.
It's old. I'll watch it. It's on Hulu, right? Wow.
Yeah, it's on Hulu. It's a really great show.
Well, thank you.
who are the stars of it? Anybody that people, not people, but anyone.
Yeah, it pretty much everyone on the cast you will have seen from something, even if you don't know their name. It's like Thomas Brody Sanger or whatever his name is. He's in a ton of things, and that's the Doctor. And then Lady Bell is played by Maya Mitchell. And then there's a ton of other cast members that I know I've seen before. I'm just terrible at remembering stars' names. Honestly, I'm surprised I saw one trailer for it, and that's all I saw on any social media the entire time I've been talking this up. So I think that's funny that it's a pretty star-studded cast, I would say, and not hearing anything about it until then. And I saw that trailer, saw a couple edits on Twitter, but that's it. I haven't
That's what
seen
I
much
kept
discussion
seeing.
about it at all.
There's like a edit kind of centering their chemistry, if you will. That I saw like so
Mm-hmm.
many people talking about on Twitter, and then people were talking about watching it, and it was all over my feed at least, but maybe that's just the algorithming for me.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you for pitching it. Thank you for going through everything. There's a delay, so I keep interrupting you. That's not on purpose. Since we're 11 minutes over, I will release you from the confines of these three squares, and I will wish you the merriest Christmas, happy holiday, happy New Year, etc. I will see you in a couple weeks because there's the holidays to talk about, amongst other things, the finale of The Crown. So excited. Carey and Kate's information is in the description below if you want to fight with them about their opinion.